Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for staying patient and for staying for this session, which I think is perhaps one of the most exciting for me, even as I speak as a financial journalist. Let me repeat what we're talking about here today. We are talking about a new middle passage by Africans for Africans, strengthening interconnectivity between Africa and its diaspora for shared prosperity. Perhaps a quick lesson for those who may not remember what the Middle Passage was. There might be some amongst us who might not remember what it is. Very quickly, the forced voyage of enslaved Africans across the Atlantic Ocean to the New World, which was not for us Africans. Let me remind you, it left both human and economic scars, millions of Africans losing their lives under the slavery institution. And for those who successfully crossed that passage, working under extremely difficult conditions as slaves in the New World. Now, the problem is that decades after the end of slavery and independence from colonization, the new Middle Passage provides the opportunity for us to strengthen the bonds between Africa and its diaspora for shared prosperity and enhanced integration into the global economy. I was very lucky today. When I was coming to the conference, I sat in the same vehicle with the son of Marcus Garvey. He's here. For those who don't know Marcus Garvey, the first self-declared president of Africa. We're going to listen to a very short video. It's called The Emergent Middle Passage.
Docked on the shores of present-day Luanda in Angola. And the pillars of diverse African economies were stolen away, bound in chains, and taken to strange lands. A tiny scar on the hip of Africa was to metastasize into a continental cancer. Our trade in gold, ornaments, spices, and agricultural commodities was replaced with trade in our people. The agents of Africa's development became instead the engines for agricultural and industrial revolutions elsewhere. But despite the tragedy, we always hoped for the return of our people. We hoped for the restoration of African dignity. We hoped for the total emancipation of all Africans. We knew that to free ourselves, we must first free our minds. And this thirst for freedom, this quest for reunification, gave us the energy and armor to confront colonialism. Through relentless sacrifice, the battle was finally won in and around the 1960s. One by one, African countries cast off colonial domination to become independent states. The reunification journey began. The birth of Afreximbank in 1993, the declaration of the Diaspora as Africa's sixth region in 2016, the historic declaration of the Year of Return by the government of Ghana in 2019, and heritage restitution, all combined to become the unassailable force powering the emergence of a new Middle Passage. Emergent, a new Africa stretching beyond geographic boundaries to the Caribbean and beyond, to become the Afri-Caribbean continent. Powered by Afreximbank's diaspora strategy, new Middle Passages are emerging, built on trade in goods and services, investment and economic opportunities. This reunion has been celebrated far and wide. In December 2020, the historic first direct flight carrying Nigerian government officials, businessmen and tourists flew from Lagos to Sangster International in Jamaica. And in September 2021, the African Union and CARICOM held the first Africa CARICOM Summit under the theme Unity Across Continents and Oceans, Opportunities for Deepening Integration. That momentous occasion was followed by the celebration of the Afri-Caribbean Trade and Investment Forum, with the convergence of over 1,000 African and Caribbean business people, policymakers and governments in Barbados to nurture new trade, investment and economic ties. Forging ahead with a common purpose for shared prosperity, the two regions have determined never to look back. Afreximbank offers the bond that binds them together, with a partnership agreement now in place that makes CARICOM states, members of the bank, benefiting from its development programs. Afreximbank is imminently opening its CARICOM offices in Barbados and has opened an initial $1.5 billion line for the region, expected to rise to $3 billion, catalyzing new investments in trade, tourism, and industrial infrastructure in the region. A new middle passage has truly emerged, bustling with shared opportunities for growth and prosperity. In the celebration and support of this, after 400 years of the arrival of the Sao João Bautista, and in accord with the Oseg Yefo, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, we say, never again. Forward ever, backwards never.
Mother Africa has got it all, the best arable land in the world that's not yet been farmed, $3.3 trillion economy. We are talking about the youngest population in the world. But before we start, I am going to ask Gervais to reflect on what middle passage means to you when you look back and you sit here in Accra, Ghana, and you think about what went by and how you are here today.
Thank you, Godfrey. Thank you very much to the Afreximbank for having this AGM and inviting many of us from the diaspora to participate. I want to say a special thank you to our Barbados Prime Minister, Mia Motley. He's been a tireless leader in uniting CARICOM, the African diaspora, with the African Union. I just want to acknowledge who she has been. I really would not be here today were it not for her leadership and the invitation from Professor Benedict Orama. My story is a little personal because my father was actually born in Lagos, Nigeria in 1929. We're from Trinidad, and he came over as another part of the Middle Passage when his father came to Nigeria to work on the railroad. I'm 58 years old, and I've only visited the continent twice. Never been to Nigeria before. But for this conference, I probably wouldn't have shown up here. What I have found and what I've become connected to is the extent to which we all share a deep, deep lineage, common culture, common customs, and a bond of relationship that is truly special. I say that because over the 400 years of slavery, we were separated, we were divided, we were ruled, and quite frankly, we were ingrained with ways of thinking, ways of speaking, ways of relating that kept us apart. But for these initiatives, let's go back to, days of independence and really a very active energy right now, we wouldn't be here. I do represent the CARICOM private sector organization, and what I saw in Nigeria, what I see in Accra is tremendous opportunities for investment and trade, tremendous opportunities for tourism, for African diaspora to come back to our motherland and experience where we came from, experience the people who we know as family at scale. Even in the United States, where there are 43 million African Americans, Professor Walle's, oh my God, expression of the most disdained race, that hit me powerfully yesterday. I lived in the United States for 19 years and experienced that disdain. And so coming back here to Africa, and I'm just inhaling a huge amount of pride in who this continent is, who we are as people, and the opportunity, the possibility of uniting together in commerce, in relationship, in our energy and pride to reclaim what was taken from us. And so that's what this middle passage means for me personally. My group of companies has now worked very hard to unleash ourselves from the shackles of top-down command and control leadership to actually lead companies from a place of love, from a place of people being like they could contribute and be themselves. Anyway, I'm so sorry. It means a lot to me. I'm very proud to be here.
No, thanks very much for that. Thanks very much for that. Spoken with passion, absolutely. But I think it's also the intention, very clear, decisive, that you have decided to do to follow what is in your heart. And we're going to talk about the other lesson that you were talking to me about earlier. Let me go to the AU. I know you sitting within NEPA, the implementing agency of the African Union in terms of our development on the continent. But I just wanted you to reflect about this issue of reconnecting and doing the Middle Passage again after so many years, because for so many people, it represents pain, isn't it?
Well, we have to recover from pain, and this is what we are doing today. We are saying no to the past and really looking forward to a brighter future as we go on. We have known what our energies would mean if we really, really use them properly. We have learned today that, what we thought was impossible is possible. Afreximbank, just last year, took us to Barbados, and just to connect with the people of Barbados was just so inspiring. It just gives you that kind of notion of what the future would be. Bright, brightness comes to you. So the dark, the blackness that used to be seen as a dark, as something that is really bad all the time, from that day onwards changed our minds to being really the white, of our blackness, really the power that is within us. For AUDA NEPAD, I think for the AUDA, this connectivity means a lot because we believe in the diaspora. Certainly, all our people that were there, given the historical injustices, but also the economic injustice, the inequality, the poverty that led our children to go there. I am one of them. My entire family lived abroad because of in 1974, because of the revolution. We just had to migrate. But the thing is that in us, Africanness lives with us. So it brings us back to our roots. And therefore, we really truly believe in that connection. But in order to accelerate, to scale it up, we need to do so much. And today's, session, and yesterday, was really exactly that. What are the things that we have to do? We know the roadmap. Now is implementation. Okay? For AUDA NEPAD, we know that there are many, many institutions that promote the diaspora, the connection, that bring Africans, transfer of knowledge, expertise here, DAF, which is here, the Diaspora Africa Forum, which is here. There are many other, diaspora organizations elsewhere. We need really to strengthen them. And through AUDA NEPAD, we would like to strengthen these institutions so that we bring back these Africans to come here. I want to give you an example, if you don't mind.
Please.
When President Obasanjo was in power, my husband happened to be his advisor in human resources, science, and technology. And what he did was to map out all the expertise, Nigerian expertise abroad. The nurses, the doctors, the engineers, name it, and formed a data bank in his office. And from time to time, they would call these experts to come and help the country. Doctors were coming on their own to serve in hospitals. Nurses were coming on their own to serve the continent. I mean, India has done it. The Jews have done it. We have to do it. And we have started doing it. In Ethiopia, the same thing. It is the diaspora that built the dam.
Yeah.
When World Bank said no to loan, Ethiopians in the diaspora bought bonds and we built the dam.
Sure.
Whether, leave the political aspect of it,
Yeah.
but when you look at development aspect of it, this is an excellent example. There are many examples I can give you. When I was in Benin, for example, there was inundation. Year after year, year after year.
Yeah.
Country would go, give us money. OCHA would come and would give us, and I was with the UN then. But one day we said, no. We said, listen, we have the youth there.
Yeah.
Let's use the youth, okay? We have 18 million at that time, Beninois. Let's ask each Beninois to bring 1 franc.
Yeah.
We did bring more money from the Beninois solidarity than we got from people from outside. We built a dam, and today, Zanyanyado, Bondo, which used to be a flooded all the time, recurring, flooded country where there is humanitarian, is now changed to be a real developed place where the youth put agricultural produce there. They even export it to Nigeria.
Absolutely.
And therefore, we really need to understand that the diaspora is the core of our development.
They are a part of
work,
Africa. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Kaberuka, you probably more than anyone else, given your long record on pushing for the economic development of the continent, would probably have seen many opportunities, because I also remember you were an economist. But listening to all of this, us reminiscing about this pain and talking about how we must now look forward, it reminds me of a question I've often asked. Can capital be patriotic? i.e., can capital thrive on the basis of passion, of belief, of this sense of injustice? Or are you laughing at us?
Thank you, Godfrey. Before I answer that question, let me say, first of all, it's a pleasure to be back in Ghana. So thank you, Ken, for your welcome. Thank you, Afreximbank, for organizing this. And thank you, Prime Minister Motley, for what you do. What you said today, I could have exactly said the same thing, because I heard you at the summit you organized with President Uhuru Kenyatta. I was attending in the background. And I wish you well. I hope that succeed. And tell us what we can do for you. But that has to be a common agenda. And this is linked to your question, Godfrey. There's something which Prime Minister Motley is working on, which supports an objective fact, not a sentimental fact. You see, at the moment, something interesting is happening. That there's a glut of savings in the global north, because populations are aging in the global north, the rich countries. And because they feel we are risky, where they're investing, they're getting real negative interest rates. Okay. Now, if the Prime Minister may have succeeded to do things were suggested, it means actually they have an opportunity here. We're not asking for patriotism or even sentimentalism. It is in the self-interest, right? Because those societies that continue to age, we have demographics dynamics, we have the opportunity for ourselves, but also for them. It is as simple as that. It's nothing sentimental. Now I want to say what I think about Middle Passage. My reading of the Middle Passage was influenced by my professor when I was a very young man, Walter Rodney, from Guyana, in a famous book called How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. He wrote it from the perspectives of the left. He had done a lot of research on the Upper Guinea coast and reiterated the importance, long-term impact of this on Africa and the Caribbean. How many people here know in this room that by the time Europe was colonizing Africa, the population of Europe was double that of Africa? There are numbers which are still an estimate, but they're between 100 and 130 million people. There's a Ghanaian professor in Harvard, Champong, who has been working on these numbers. Europe, in spite of the Napoleonic Wars and all that has happened, out-migration, was double the size of the continent. Is this the reason maybe we were very weak at the time? It could be. And I'll tell you, come to 1950, European population was still bigger than ours. We began to square the numbers around 1970s, 80s, 2000. Now numbers have gone the opposite direction. So I go back to this point that these numbers will not change. As we move forward, we in the global south, the markets are here, the opportunities are here. So the savings glut in the north has to be recycled somewhere. And that has to be ourselves. I say this because I have a feeling that sometimes in this conversation, some colleagues in the North think they are doing us a favor. No, they are doing themselves a favor. All right? And in so doing, things are happening here. And I don't have time to show you these numbers. I wish I had time to show you what has happened in ASEAN, for example, in the ASEAN region. Sure. The GDP of Vietnam, a small country of 100 million people, has gone from $14 billion in 1990, $14 billion, to $500 billion today. 14 to 500 in 30 years.
Sure.
Now, I tell you, if I show the numbers of other countries in the neighborhood, it's about the same. Is GDP up 20, 30, 40 times? And you know what? What capital came from? It is capital from Japan, from South Korea, a bit from China. So those guys see the opportunities in Southeast Asia. It's nearby, so it was easy. Now, to have this conversation with our colleagues in other parts of the world will take a bit of time, but it will have to happen. Because the wealth of the Asian region, ASEAN, whether it is Thailand, Indonesia, India, Vietnam, is worth being circulated in that region. So, I've answered your question by looking into what MEA is trying to work on. All right? We are in that space of self-interest. And it will be useful, as we go to Paris, for us to think through that square. Now, I want to end by saying also, on this Middle Passage issue, this is not economics, this is politics. Do you know that 10,000 Caribbeans have died in this continent to liberate Southern Africa?
Sure.
I don't know the history of your region would be, Godfrey, without 10,000 Cubans who died in Angola. Died, wounded, or missing. So we have also a link of blood. And therefore, it means we have to try and build up institutions, networks, people to people, people like Afreximbank, to make this thing a meaning, because we are one, we are together, we're a third of the world. And between the 40 million people in the Caribbean, 80 Afro-descendants in other parts of Latin America, because then it would be about $140 million, including those in Brazil, we have a voice in the world. We have a voice in the world on reform of the UN, reform of the international finance, on the climate issues, and that we should deploy.
Dr. Kaberuka, thank you. Thank you for those wise words. And the cold numbers, by the way. The cold numbers. The cold numbers that you brought that shame us. The cold numbers, hard facts that you have.
That is a defect to my profession. I apologize.
We appreciate them. Ken, I judged by the spring step that you took when you were coming up the stairs and the hair on top of your head that you are the youngest amongst us. I made you listen to all of this because we're talking about your future, right? But I also want to give you an opportunity to reflect on this Middle Passage conversation. And then let's swing the conversation and talk about the future very quickly. And I'm asking in terms of that question, do we have the platforms? Do we have the, I'm not going to say political will, business will. Do we have the capital to be able to do so, and the goods and services to be able to make this a reality?
Right, thank you very much. And I consider this a privilege. I think looking at the panel, I'm the only person from pure private sector, and I've also listened very carefully to the, should I say, the concerns that have been observed, experienced by our political leaders from the Caribbean and also from Africa. And clearly, we do have a serious problem. So if at the political level you have this sort of problems, you can just imagine what private sector is dealing with, mostly from Africa, because you've been dealt with from multiple areas. So multiple dimensions to look at it. So I'm functioning or operating in the oil industry, basically providing infrastructure to support the development of hydrocarbons. And you will have to deal with skill set issues. you would have to deal with market. But the big elephant in the room is always finance. And so this middle passage clearly solves most of the problems. One, you are able to aggregate, because when there is a crisis, it's also an opportunity. We have, as Prime Minister Barbados just put it, we've had a time we were victims, and that also means we've had the privilege to acquire skill sets, understand new cultures. And yesterday, Professor Wole Soyinka dimensioned culture in ways and manners. And if you look into the African continent itself, it's very difficult to say what is the African culture, because we've got the Arab dimension, we've got the Black African dimension. So it is fair to say global Africa, because now we got huge population of Africans who are in the Caribbean, America, and even in Europe. So there's a huge opportunity that we pull from that, and Madam has also made reference to that, and Nigeria has been a great beneficiary of that. But more than that is, do we have the institutions up until the Afrexim forceful approach to addressing the financial situation?
Yeah, but you can also look at the AU.
I'll say something.
Yeah,
Right.
go on. Go
So-
on, finish your thought.
I think that Afrexim will have an additional responsibility to mentor and create, which they are already doing with the industrial parks and all that. But if you look into the hydrocarbon or energy infrastructure, so if we just take my experience, I had no desire to be an entrepreneur in trying to do my private business. I had a very good job working for a European company in the oil industry, focused on helping oil companies to produce their resource. But as it turns out, most of the multinational oil companies would almost operate like mini governments in these places that they operate. And what does that mean? You have very limited opportunity to offer services. And so when we look at the Africans trying to get into the same business as the multinationals, what you find is the risk profile is very high. So a European service provider is very unlikely to take on an African-owned business risk.
Yeah.
And so if an African operator does not have an Afrexim or similar organization where you talk about the whole patriotism, even in business, then the chances that they will not have someone to give them $100 million to drill a potential dry hole. This was what led me to working for private or becoming an entrepreneur to support indigenous companies, because we clearly see the risk component that was there, which we can understand and work with them. This is how we become. It's tough, it's hard, and we're grateful for the initiatives that Afrexim and the partners are doing in the African continent, and of course the Caribbean, and we're going along those lines.
Absolutely. So I want us to move quickly and address the issue of the structures that we need to build for us to be able to get this message following with goods and services. Dr. Kaberuka, I'm coming to you very quickly, and then we come to the AU.
You know, let me begin what has been happening in recent years, which Ken knows very well. During the COVID crisis, we Africans suddenly found ourselves on our own, totally, even when we had the money. Mr. Orama here and Afreximbank put facilities at our disposal to acquire vaccines, but there were no vaccines to be acquired. All right? And so the African Union put up a mechanism to help us acquire a therapeutic diagnostic for COVID, because even those are not available. And that platform was made available to our brothers and sisters in the Caribbean. I was working on that platform. I recall how enthusiastic our colleagues were. The same for AVAT. But these were things made in a crisis time. But they tested. It was a stress test of what we could do together. Now, I like very much what Eximbank is doing on these PAPs with the Caribbean. So we need to create institutions which have a DNA we understand. That is the first thing we have to do. You know, I think Miyamoto was saying at this summit in Nairobi, or rather called with President Uhuru Kenyatta, that many of these countries in the Caribbean have very small size population.
Yes.
If you exclude Cuba, maybe Haiti, maybe the Dominican Republic, I don't know about Trinidad and Tobago. You never know about
We're
Puerto
saying
Rico.
small as well.
Puerto Rico, I don't know if they're the Caribbean or somewhere else, I don't know. But these are, I think, Mia, you gave an example of one country, a country called, with the size of the UK. That's right, Guyana. He said, Guyana is the size of the UK, but it has a population of less than 1 million people. The UK, 65 million people. But you know, but they have a lot of strength from my experience in that region. The experience of those countries is that because they live under existential conditions vis-a-vis extreme weather events, they have developed very resilient mechanisms. And many of them also, even the education system, we have not learned from.
Yeah.
I would like to see institutions which enable us to work together, to cross-finance, but also to share these experiences. Some will happen endogenically, others will have to create. But I think the Eximbank is beginning from a good backing. But I think on vaccine and acquisition of capacity to face pandemics, I think we should build on the experience of Harvard and the platform.
Absolutely. Practical. Thank you. Ma'am?
Thank you. I think, there are 3 areas as African Union Development Agency which we are looking at. In the last conference that we had in Barbados, my discussion with the Prime Minister, one of the things that was clear was that, the Caribbeans have aging population, and whereas we have got a young population.
Yes.
And therefore, creating that exchange of skilled laborers is very important. Why would our young, skilled, young ones with masters, PhDs, and really, skilled people, drown in the ocean when the Caribbeans are there in need of such a capacity?
Sure.
So that is an area which is a quick win, which we have promised, and we're working with the Commonwealth, but also we'll be working with CARICOM in that respect. But the second thing, which is critical and very important for us, which is our priority program, is infrastructure development. Without infrastructure, then, we cannot see any integration. Live alone, with the 6th region, but within Africa itself.
Yep.
So infrastructure is critical. It requires a lot of resources, and that's where we are working together with Afreximbank. And I am pleading to the Afreximbank because today in the presentation, when we are looking at the progress, there was the project development facility that they are putting. In our DANEPAD, there is SDM. That coordination, that working together is very important. So we will be working with Afreximbank in developing that. The third thing, which the Prime Minister echoed, is really, we have to really work hard in making the carbon market work for us. And that we're going to COP28, the loss and damage is there, but we have to do much more work.
Yeah, I'm going to come back to you because I need you to talk very quickly about the AU diaspora strategy, because Afreximbank clearly has got one. And just the other day, I think the US president announced, developments on a US diaspora strategy, targeting the very targeted people that we are talking about today. But I made you listen because you have come here with intention. If you were to speak to the people who are in this room today, what would you say to them in terms of what you want to see to follow the dream of the reconnection that you have done historically with solid businesses on the ground?
Thank you again for the opportunity. It is a tremendous, tremendous advantage, the youth that is here on the continent. We have all, and Prime Minister Motley spoke about this imperial shadow that we are all living under. And over the course of the last 10 years, I'm the CEO and president of a group of companies, an investment holding company called the Massey Group in the Caribbean. And what I want to speak about in terms of an opportunity and a structure is leadership. We have been taught to lead by the same imperial people who colonized us. The command and control structures, the privilege and lower privileges for others who are not as high on the totem pole. The speak when I called and answer. You're what I want. Don't speak back to people. A suppressing of our expression. And I see here in Africa, there's just this natural. And you have all these young people. So if you can leapfrog again the systems of management and leadership to actually empower young people to be seen, to be heard, to own, to be invested in, I think we will shoot up the accelerated curve by which development happens. And there's a huge opportunity for us to say, look, we set that aside. We don't lead like that anymore. If you look at the African history, there were elders, wise people who encouraged young people. And I think we need to go back to that as a paradigm for running countries, as a paradigm for running business. I know that in our business, we've seen the tremendous differences. And we're a 100-year enterprise. And it's taken a lot to release those shackles. And I think that that's a structure that I would encourage us all to take on.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Spoken from the heart again. I feel you, brother. I feel you. I feel you. I feel you. Let's talk very quickly about the AU diaspora strategy. And I really want the thoughts from all our panelists as we close up because, our time is running out. Can I begin with you very quickly? And one question I would ask you, though, is that connected in any way to what Afreximbank is doing? Or am I being a little presumptuous?
Well, actually, I want to be honest. They are all scattered all over the place. So we need to bring them together.
There need to be one strategy.
Yes, we need to have one strategy. And they have we have to really have a review of what exists. They're everywhere. Country by country, we have a strategy. Region by region, we have a strategy. And we need to review that, and we have to come out with one plan that gives at least, some highlights of the actions, priority actions that we need to take step by step. But, if I can say just one word, we have launched a program that is called Energize Africa. Why did we launch this program? We launched this program because even if we say we are working towards the Africa we want, that is the Africa of this generation that wants. But what we really need is that the youth themselves, the Africa they want. What kind of Africa do they want? We need to integrate these young ones to really be developing that. And therefore, to do that, they have to be integrated in the public service. Our public service in Africa is aging. Okay? And what we see is what we want. But we need to put them there so that they can develop their strategies. The second one is really developing again, reviewing what exists and making sure these innovations, whatever they are, what is it that they require to express their creativity. And the last thing is the startups and the support that we have. Everybody does that. But we really need to look at these, and there should be a place to upscale it and also to scale it up.
And we use the youngster that we have on the panel to give some thoughts on that very quickly before we round up with Dr. Kapiru.
No, I want to thank you and say that I agree with everything I've heard. The president of Ghana was saying, I don't recall where, about how the biggest diaspora in the world at some point were Europeans. How many people here know that 65% of Argentinians are of Italian origin? Oh, yeah. 5% of Argentinians are of Italian origin. So, why am I saying this? We're talking about the diaspora as it exists now, but I think it is going to grow. Unless we can find a way of increasing the rate of investment in our countries to provide the jobs here. If not, there will be out-migration. There will be out-migration. And so for me, these two conversations are linked. Ability to reform international financial institutions, international finance, so we can attract resources here, create jobs here, or there will be out-migration. And so we need to think about diaspora in the current status, the static one, but also the dynamic sense of how we manage that in the future. I think we have to think about it both ways. Ask once an Italian minister who kept going on about how a few thousand Africans were causing social problems in Italy, and he could not explain to me how half of Argentina was of Italian origin. All right? As I kept insisting, he thought I was being a bit cumbersome. But bear that in mind, because either we invest here, which means attract capital and skills, or there will be out-migration.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I see Mark Edo walking is not modeling. He's trying to say to me, my time is up. But Ken, let's just say we have not given you the last word as a youngster. We're talking about your future, right? You have the last word.
Afrexim has put all that in the charter, AU and all that. One fundamental issue that we have to take into consideration, which I believe the institutions like AU and Afrexim already started, is the lack of trust. Because today, I don't see any reason why the African gas industry is not tapping from Trinidad and Tobago, because they are foremost leaders in the gas industry. But do we have sufficient trust? Because Trinidad and Tobago is predominantly diaspora Africans.
Absolutely.
So, but with the Afrexim concept, what Afrexim is doing, and if we take similar steps, we will continue to build that trust capital more and more, because Africans are already suffering lack of trust from global institutions. And then Africans in diaspora, and they have been victims. Let's be fair. There have been instances where the diaspora Africans have said, okay, I want to do something, I want to come back here, and they've been hurt. Because we will always have people that will go out of the original plans of the founding fathers. So Afrexim is bringing out huge value of trust, AU, and we have to just make more effort so that more and more diasporans will be comfortable to invest.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
Absolutely. Thank you. And of course, to Afreximbank, I think we say you have stood up, you have shown your hand through deliberate actions. You have created an opportunity where I think for many people there was none. I'd like to thank my panel. Please help me to thank them and to thank you for listening in.